The story of the Sea of Flames is really integral to the approach we're taking for this novel. And I just found this little quote. I just Googled and found a quote on stories. Stories are light, and light is precious in a world so dark. I think that fits really nicely with what we're going to approach and explore in this novel. So I thought what we'd do is start with page 20. If you've got your novel, you can read along with me. But we're just going to read the excerpt. It begins, we're going to start here with he clears his throat, and it's just telling the story of the Sea of Flames. Centuries ago, in the place we now call Borneo, a prince plucked a blue stone from a dry riverbed because he thought it was pretty. But on the way back to his palace, the prince was attacked by men on horseback and stabbed in the heart. Stabbed in the heart? Is that true? A boy says, Hush! The thieves stole his rings, his horse, everything. But because the little blue stone was clenched in his fist, they did not discover it, and the dying prince managed to crawl home. Then he fell unconscious for 10 days. On the 10th day, to the amazement of his nurses, he sat up, opened his hand, and there was the stone. The Sultan's doctors said it was a miracle, that the prince never should have survived such a violent wound. The nurses said the stone must have healing powers. The Sultan's jewellers said something else. They said the stone was the largest raw diamond anyone had ever seen. Their most gifted stone cutter spent 80 days faceting it, and when he was done, it was a brilliant blue, the blue of tropical seas, but it had a touch of red at its centre, like flames in the drop of water. The Sultan had the diamond fitted into a crown for the prince, and it was said that when the young prince sat on his throne and the sun hit him just so, he became so dazzling that visitors could not distinguish his figure from the light itself. Up here now. Are you sure this is true? Asked the girl. Hush, said the boy. The stone came to be known as the Sea of Flames. Some believe the prince was a deity, that as long as he kept the stone, he could not be killed. But something strange began to happen. The longer the prince wore his crown, the worse his luck became. In a month, he lost a brother to drowning and a second brother to snakebite. Within 6 months, his father died of disease. To make matters even worse, the Sultan's scouts announced that a great army was gathering in the east. The prince called together his father's advisers. All said he should prepare for war, all but one, a priest, who said he'd had a dream. And in the dream, a goddess of earth had told him she'd made the Sea of Flames as a gift for her lover, the god of the sea, and was sending the jewel to him through the river. But when the river dried up and the prince plucked it out, the goddess became enraged. She cursed the stone and whoever kept it. Every child leans forward, Murray Law along with them. The curse was this: the keeper of the stone would live forever, but so long as he kept it, misfortunes would fall on all those he loved, one after another, in unending rain. Live forever? But if the keeper threw the diamond into the sea, thereby delivering it to its rightful recipient, the goddess would lift the curse. So the prince, now Sultan, thought for 3 days and 3 nights and finally decided to keep the stone. It had saved his life. He believed it made him indestructible. He had the tongue cut out of the priest's mouth. Ouch, says the youngest boy. Big mistake, says the tallest girl. The invaders came, says the warder, and destroyed the palace and killed everyone they found, and the prince was never seen again. And for 200 years no one heard any more about the Sea of Flames. Some said the stone was recut into many other stones, into smaller stones. Others said the prince still carried the stone, that he was in Japan or Persia, that he was a humble farmer, that he never seemed to grow old. And so the stone fell out of history, until one day when a French diamond trader, during a trip to the Golconda mines in India, was shown a massive pear-cut diamond, 133 carats, near perfect clarity, as big as a pigeon's egg, he wrote, as blue as the sea, but with a flare of red at its core. He made a casting of the stone and sent it to a gem-crazy duke in Lorraine, warning him of the rumours of a curse, but the duke wanted the diamond very badly. So the trader brought it to Europe, and the duke fitted it to the end of a walking stick, and carried it everywhere. Uh-oh. Within a month, the Duchess contracted a throat disease. 2 of their favourite servants fell off the roof and broke their necks. Then the Duke's only son died in a riding accident. Though everyone said the Duke himself had never looked better, he became afraid to go out, afraid to accept visitors. Eventually, he was so convinced that his stone was the accursed sea of flames that he asked the king to shut it up in his museum on the condition that it be locked deep inside a specially built vault and the vault not be opened for 200 years. And 196 years have passed. All the children remain quiet a moment. Several do the maths on their fingers. Then they raise their hands as one. Can we see it? No. This is a great little story, and we have to ask ourselves, why is it the story so fascinating? What is it about it that makes it so interesting? And certainly what it does is it captures our imaginations. It pits greed and desire, and that greed and desire for wealth, against family and love. So people are prepared to sacrifice everything for wealth and power, even if it causes death and destruction and heartache for people close to us. We all know people who would sacrifice everything for wealth and power. So we see examples of it in our world. So we're well attuned to that story. The story in the Sea of Flames, it has a long history. It has a connection to other historical periods and cultures. And it's full of mystery and intrigue. So where is the stone? Where has it been? Who has owned it? All those sort of questions are raised, and that's what really we find really fascinating about it. That mystery that comes with it, and what it certainly does is it does challenge our true selves. We think, well, how would we react in this instance if we were in possession of this stone? How would we react, and what decisions would we have to make if we were placed in that situation? So it tests our morality, and it challenges our inner being. Okay, so why not throw the diamond into the sea? Well, really, it's too beautiful. It's too difficult to give up such a beautiful thing. And we have this nice quote that follows, and it sort of emphasises the attraction that the diamond gives, and that is that something so small could be so beautiful, worth so much. Only the strongest people can turn away from feelings like that. So there's something that allures it to us, even when we think we're capable of avoiding and resisting such temptation. When we're placed in that position, maybe it's different. It sort of brings us to the Gollum in Lord of the Rings. So it is a story that we can see there. Now, what does the Sea of Flames represent? What does this story represent? And it represents the curse of man's greed and hubris. It represents our weaknesses. We're all susceptible to the desire of beautiful things. And this is nicely illustrated by Dr. Giffard when he says, you want to know what it looks like, that's why you're so curious. But Marie Law replies, no, I want to believe that Papa hasn't been anywhere near it, because she can see the dangerous aspect of it. The attraction of it is really compelling, but it's very dangerous, and she cares for her father and doesn't want to be drawn into this story and this diamond. So storytelling in a broader sense can be drawn from this. So storytelling has the ability to capture our imaginations, just like the story of the stone. It has the ability to challenge our assumptions and our beliefs, and it assists us in our pursuit of truth. helps us get closer to truth. We all have an inquisitiveness built into our DNA, and it's a common human trait for us to search for meaning in our lives and in our world. Might not be so prominent as a 17, 18-year-old, but certainly as you age, that is something that people are always searching for meaning. So diamonds are used as a motif in the novel to convey Dor's message about the importance of revealing micro-narratives to the world. They need to be told and they need to be heard. Okay, these are all the small stories, all these silent voices, all the marginalised voices. They need to be out there and they need to be heard because they add to that bigger narrative, the grand narrative. So they shed light on the experience of war, and we gain a closer insight of what is the real truth in all these stories. And darkness and light is evident throughout the novel. They are competing forces, but we have to ask ourselves, are they totally binary? Is there a crossover between darkness and light? Do they exist within each other? And on page 48, the French broadcaster talks about coal. And he says, consider a single piece glowing in your family's stove. See it, children? That chunk of coal was once a green plant, a fern or reed that lived 1 million years ago, or maybe 2 million, maybe even 100 million. Can you imagine 100 million years? Every summer for the whole life of that plant, its leaves caught what light they could and transformed the sun's energy into itself, into bark, twigs, stems, because plants eat light in much the way we eat food. But then the plant died and fell, probably into water, and decayed into peat, and the peat was folded inside the earth for years upon years, eons in which something like a month or a decade or even your whole life was just a puff of air, a snap of 2 fingers. And eventually the peat dried up and became like stone, and someone dug it up, and the coal man brought it to your house. And maybe you yourself carried it to the stove. And now that sunlight 100 million years old, is heating your home tonight. So he's basically saying that coal begins as a plant, it needs light, it eventually dies and makes its way below the Earth's surface and remains in darkness for millions of years. When it does resurface, we burn it and it brings forth new light. So it is sort of cyclical in what it's saying, and it's paradoxical. Out of darkness comes light, and it suggests that everything in the world is cyclical. Dor is suggesting that everything in the world is more complex than what it seems. So there is no simple answer. And this here applies to the experience of war. One example of this is that all Germans are presented as the enemy. There's a nice quote on page 515 that illustrates this. If I can move off this page. And it says, in the stories after the war, all the resistant heroes were dashing, sinewy types. And the Germans, they were psychopathic, sex-crazed torturers of beautiful Jewesses. The novel, however, presents most Germans thinking and behaving in exactly the same fashion as the French. So his novel warns us to look beyond the stereotypes and the assumptions we have about war, because we've learnt the dominant narrative. And we need a broader perspective. We need to fill in the gaps and silences. The truth, the reality, is often different to what we perceive. Carbon is the essence of both coal and diamonds. And coal and diamonds are prominent features in this narrative. We know about the Sea of Flames, but Werner lives in fear of having to work in the coal mines when he turns 15 years old. His father died in the mine, and along with many others, so it is a real worry to him. So coal and diamonds begin as a speck of carbon, and over millions of years, microscopic layers are added to them. And so, we have quotes that we can explore, like a real diamond is never perfect. And, it may appear perfect, but there might be impurities to it. And then that's something to explore, that the perception is that it's absolute perfection, but maybe it's not. There's another little quote there as well. So diamonds. On page 52, Dr. Jafar talks to Murray-Law about diamonds, and Dorr uses this scene to build his motif, that diamonds and stories are one and the same. He says, he says here, and we'll go to the next. You know how all crystals grow, Lorette, by adding microscopic layers, a few thousand atoms every month, each atop the next, millennia after millennia. That's how stories accumulate too. All the old stones accumulate stories. That little rock you are so curious about may have seen Alaric sack Rome. It may have glittered in the eyes of the pharaohs. Scythian queens might have danced all night wearing it. Wars might have been fought over it. So here Dorr engages in the power and value of stories to individuals and societies. Each time a story is told, it gains another layer. It evolves and grows in meaning. It draws on its past tellings, and the new telling embellishes it. Each story is valuable. Like diamonds, there are good ones and there are bad ones. And they're never perfect, but the good ones inspire our curiosity and compel us to want to know more. So Murray-Law is interested in the rumours surrounding the Sea of Flames. They spark her curiosity and imagination. She is also influenced by her father and by Jules Verne. She reads 20,000 Leagues Underneath the Sea. And they believe imagination is important, but it must be balanced with logic. And then Murray-Law reads from 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, where Aronnax is wondering about the mythical Kraken. And he says, "But I'm letting myself be carried away by reveries which I must now put aside," writes Aronnax. Enough of these fantasies. And then the narrator adds to this. Logic, reason, pure science. These are the proper way to pursue a mystery. So it's interesting that we look at that and we're getting these conflicting approaches. Do we use imagination? Do we use science and logic? So Dorr skillfully uses intertextuality to develop Murray-Law's developing worldview. Like the layers of carbon, every story and every experience she has had shapes her worldview. And like darkness and light, there is a competition between imagination and science. And Dorr suggests that it cannot be viewed in extreme polarities. They cannot exist without the other. So Murray-Law learns that life is about balance. And this wisdom comes from real life experiences, but also from fiction.